We all know that effective internal communication is the secret to high-performing teams and companies. Did you know that according to a Tower Watson study, companies with effective employee communication tools see 47% higher total returns than businesses that communicate ineffectively? Beekeeper, a leader in employee communication, has developed an effective guide to help you understand your internal communications, especially if you work with a frontline team. Download Beekeeper's free guide today at www.beekeeper.io/crisisavertedpodcast. That's www.beekeeper.io/crisisavertedpodcast. Welcome to the Crisis Averted Podcast, produced by CJ Media Solutions. I'm your host, CJ Arlotta. In this episode, I speak with Scott Lopez, president and owner of Zepol Productions Inc. During our conversation, he shares how he used his extensive network in the tech space to overcome hurdles when growing his business and why being able to ask for help reveals strength, not weakness. Feel free to send me your feedback at cj@cjmediasolutionsllc.com. Oh, and if you're listening to the Crisis Averted podcast on Apple Podcasts, please leave a rating, review, or both. I'd greatly appreciate it. Thanks for listening. Scott, thanks for joining me on the Crisis Averted podcast today.
Yeah, no problem, CJ.
So for people who aren't familiar with you, could you tell us a little bit about your background, who you are, your experience?
Sure. Yeah, so Scott Lopez, I'm the founder of Zepol Productions Inc. It's Zepol is just Lopez backwards. It's always a question I get. So we call ourselves a production company because we produce private label and exclusive brand programs for distribution partners, reseller partners in the IT hardware space.
How'd you start the company? What's the background with that?
Yeah, so my background is Ingram Micro. I joined the Army when I was 17 years old and got out when I was only 20. My first real job was with Ingram Micro, the world's largest computer distributor, back in 1996. So I've always kind of had distribution in my blood. About 15 years ago, I went to work for a manufacturer with a lot of people doing disti and was in a third-party hardware space and been in that field for a while. I was created a model called exclusive branding for partners instead of doing a private label internally, right? So like let's say Costco has Kirkland brand or whatever. Those things cost quite a bit of money to fire up internally and obviously staff. So I created a model where I can basically give you a new private label or in-house label where I own it, I operate it, and there's no liability to you. It's a turnkey solution. So really good for the small business guys out there on the reseller side to help them get a new revenue stream. And again, zero liability, very easy startup process.
So how'd you go about creating that?
I was kind of lucky. I think, like I said, I worked for Ingram Micro, and about 15 years ago, a lot of people tried doing private labels back in the day. Some big guys, some small guys, and they all failed because you were counting on an OEM, an original equipment manufacturer, to produce your product for you, and they kind of like gave you the product, but didn't give you any kind of tools to sell it, right? So I went to CDW, who's the world's largest reseller. And said, hey, I'm going to power this program for you, but I'm going to power it through Ingram Micro, a distributor. And this doesn't have to be for just IT product, right? It can be anything. If there's a widget out there, there's a distributor that sells it, right? Car parts, medical parts, you name it. Anything is sold by most parts are sold through a distribution model, right? So we went to CDW and said, hey, we're going to power this thing for you. It's a turnkey model through distribution. All you got to do is say yes and flip a switch on your EDI feed, and boom, you have a program. You have a program up and running, and that kind of got a name for myself. I've built programs for CDW, Ingram Micro, SHI. These are all big computer IT guys. And again, it's kind of a universal model.
Now, what about starting ZPI? What were some of the challenges with starting the company?
Yeah, so I didn't have a college background. I was just like I said, for college, I was a tanker in the Army, so not a lot of business in tanking school. So luckily, I worked for the biggest distributor out there, so it was easy to kind of get the model. And that's a good thing about working for big companies or any company, really. You're getting their IP as well, right? So you put a little spin on it, now it's yours. I started ZPI as a contractor, a consultant to go work for other companies, right? Instead of me being W-2'd, I would always go into as a sales position, 1099, and I'm not one for I think like most SMB guys, right? We don't like bosses, so I would
Right.
always 1099. So that's when I created the pro with the actual corporation. But since then, ZPI now has underneath it 4 other brands that we own and operate for the 4 largest distributors in the world. So pretty unique situation, pretty unique story. I think it's just I've got another book coming out. It's not who you know, it's who you bro. It really is just relationships, right? I was able to call on some big name people that I've known for a long time, and luckily they trust me. And I got a good a model and good history in the channel, and so it was not as hard as it sounds, not as hard as people think it is. So just got to put your nose down and do it.
Scott, could you talk a little bit about those brands that are under your company?
Yeah, sure. So Zepol Productions Inc. again is the parent company of a brand called AltNet, which is alternative networking, ATS, which is alternative technology solutions, ATO Data, which is alternative to OEM. I think you're seeing a little theme there. What we do is we offer a alternative to OEM. So think of it in your Chevy truck. If you went to take your truck to Chevy because your starter is broken there, and that's $550 for the starter because we're going to use original equipment from the manufacturer, right? That's OEM, original equipment manufacturer. Or you could go to Pep Boys or AutoZone and buy a starter from there, which is their house brand, right? And their house brand is half the price. Probably came from the same manufacturer, just half the price, right? You're not paying for the name. So all of these brands are alternative to OEM products, hardware, and support and services that we do know as well. For anyone from enterprise, big guys, to little small school districts that have 10 units on-prem data center hardware.
Now, how long have you had each of those brands? Did you build them out all at once, or was it over time you built each one?
Yeah, so AltNet was the first one. I've had AltNet fired up for about 5 years, and AltNet I was doing alternative networking hardware. So again, instead of buying a Cisco or HP memory module, you would buy the AltNet memory module. Just has my name on it instead of theirs. No big deal, nothing different on the hardware itself. AltNet was about 5 years old, and I had another contract that I had to shelf that program, and then I went to work for a company called Sourcing Solutions that does EOL discontinued hardware for the distribution channel, again, for IT product. And they brought me in to build a brand for Ingram Micro, a house brand selling, again, third-party hardware. Once that was done, I had a non-compete for a year, and I started building out a model or program to offer third-party maintenance in the channel and from distribution, as opposed to the way it's been done for the last 40 years or so, which is just direct to the end user, right? So the channel is the manufacturer, a distributor, a reseller partner, and an end user. So in like consumer electronics world, you would think Samsung would be the TV you want to buy. Samsung sells it to Ingram Micro. Ingram Micro sells it to Best Buy. Best Buy sells it to you, right? We're just doing the same thing, but with maintenance and support now.
Why does that maintenance and support work for you, the third party maintenance model?
It's always been around. Third-party maintenance has been around for decades. And again, this isn't just for IT hardware. It could be for anything, right? You can buy extended. I'm sure you're getting a lot of phone calls. If you guys are get the same calls I do about your extended maintenance on your car has been it's
Right.
about to expire.
Yeah.
We're just doing the exact same thing for hardware, but it's across the board. You can do it for medical devices. You can do it for obviously cars, like we talked about. So it's important, and the timing couldn't be better, right? We all knew that there was a recession about to happen, right? About 5 years ago, and maybe it was 4 or 5 years ago, GM laid off 15,000 people, and they discontinued certain car models, right? When that happens, there's a red flag. There's going to be a recession. There's going to be a slowdown, right? So again, about 3 years ago, I started hearing a lot more about third-party maintenance in the reseller world where I was at, where it's never been sold in distribution. It's always been sold at the reseller level or direct to an end user. So I started thinking, well, if I've been doing third-party hardware, I can sell third-party maintenance. And so COVID kind of kicked off that recession, right? We already knew there was a slowdown. So everyone started kind of putting money and started to build up their third-party maintenance models and programs, but no one was doing it in distribution. I'm the only one that's doing it in disty the way I do it, right? Once COVID hit, though, it really kind of fired off a couple of different things, right? End users, customers that, one, they don't have any IT budget for 2021. It got spent on laptops to work from home and security to work from home and everything. And like to send their people to work from home. So their budget's gone. Some people have zero revenue, right? One of the customers that we work with is Carnival Cruise Lines. And, one of the big major OEMs was pushing them to refresh and buy new hardware, or at least stick with their maintenance program, which is obviously twice as expensive as ours. And, the response was, are you not watching the news? We don't have any revenue.
Right. Yeah.
We literally don't have any money. Like we haven't done anything for a year. So kind of just a perfect storm. We are a counter-cyclical model. So basically when times get tough, CFOs look, where can we cut costs? And the first thing they do is they go to the data center and they say, well, let's use third-party options as much as possible.
Now, when it comes to the third-party maintenance, right? You mentioned before that nobody was doing it at the distribution level. Why is that the case?
Because it's kind of a manual process, where it has been in the past, right? That was one of the biggest obstacles and one of the things I had to convince the executives at these big distributors, because they were all saying, Scott, we've tried services, they always fail. We don't do it well because we're so far removed from the end user and it's a manual process. It's just not an easy, right? It's just easier for the end user to buy it directly from a provider, or an end user to buy it directly from a reseller partnered with a provider. So just one level there, right? But when you buy, let's say you went onto Amazon and you bought an Apple iPhone, and you would buy one iPhone, and then a little window would pop up and say, do you want 1 year Apple iCare with it? And you say yes, click one, and there's a SKU attached to that part number, right? So they can manage it, a catalog basically. So when you buy new hardware, it doesn't have to be just IT hardware. It could be anything. When you buy a vacuum from Best Buy, they ask if you want to buy 1 year maintenance on it, right? And there's a SKU attached to that they attach to your order, right? So all we did was map out all of the OEM SLAs available from companies like Cisco or HP, Juniper, some big guys, IBM, obviously, the big data center guys. We just put a SKU to it. We said, do you want 1 year 8x5 next business day parts replacement? Here's your part number, add one. So we really simplified it. I have a customer that's been in business. This guy's 30-year-old, big company out of San Diego. And he's like, that's the dumbest, smartest thing I've ever seen. That is so simple. Why has this never been done before? I think just because I've sat in the chair of a reseller and I've sat in the chair of a disty rep, and then just, to me, my mind thinks in optimizing things, right? I'm actually writing a book, and there's this chapter in the book saying, like, being lazy is not that bad. Being lazy and cutting corners in business, cutting corners is actually called optimizing. Right? So if you find a path of least resistance, it's a good thing. So my mind thinks in, how can I get this done easier? How can I make my life easier, right? Work smarter, not harder. And it just all came together and just right time. One other thing too is I'm old now. So when you're 47, you've got 30 or 25 years of experience in the channel, and
that's not old. Come on.
Well,
you're older than me, but that's not old.
I can't dunk anymore, CJ. That's what sucks.
All right. Were you ever able to dunk?
I was back in the day. Yeah, I'll tell you a quick story. My wife, when we used to work out the same gym out in Southern California, and one day she's walking by and she bangs on the glass and she's like kind of gives me like little dunk it, like, go ahead, because I was always talking crap to her. I can dunk.
Yeah.
She's like, go ahead and do it. And so I get up and dunk it, and she was like, "Oh, big deal. You're 6'2". I'm like, I'm 45. That is a big deal.
That's great.
He wasn't impressed.
Yeah. But so going back to what you were saying before, Scott, I mean, you also found an opportunity. You mentioned the laziness thing, right? But I mean, you
Mhm.
also found an opportunity in the market and went for it.
Yeah, yeah. Again, right place, right time. I happen to have the background for third party maintenance, and it was one of the guys that we spoke to. He's the president of sales at, again, one of the world's largest distributors, and luckily my VP is he knew him from back in the day and played cards. I never met him before. The guy's a very smart, 30-year veteran in the IT space. And he gets on a call and he's like, I got 30 minutes. I only took this call because Steve Erickson's a friend. If I can help, I can help. I have a hard stop in 30 minutes. So I'm like, okay, well, great way to start the meeting. So I'm like, okay. I said, have you ever heard of Park Place Technologies? He says, no, I never heard of them. I'm like, well, they're the partner of the year at CDW, who's their number one customer. And he's like, well, you've got my attention. So what is it? Third party maintenance. Disty's never sold it. Distribution, who actually sells 80% of the hardware comes from a distributor. They've got billions and billions. These three guys represent $160 billion in revenue, and they've never sold hardware support. When things are 4, 5, 6, 7 years old, their job is to sell them a new one,
Sure.
refresh it,
Yeah.
right? Not make it last longer. So today, again, a perfect storm, right? Now people are saying, well, I can't afford to refresh it. I don't have a budget for 2021. I got 5,000 laptops I don't need, but I don't have money to buy new data center equipment. So I have to make it last longer. And the OEMs are saying, well, it's end of support from us. We're no longer going to support it. Or if we do, the cost is so expensive to buy the years 4 and 5 maintenance from these guys. They make it where it's like, well, it's $100,000 for maintenance or $105,000 to just buy all new hardware, right? They kind of make you buy the hardware. So again, right time. These guys hold the data. We just had to explain it to them, right? You know, again, their jobs are not to extend the life of hardware. Their jobs are to refresh it, but no one's refreshing these days. And now we've given them the four favorite words to a distributor: high margin, incremental revenue. We
Now
brought
you
them.
mentioned, yeah, and you mentioned that one of your clients is cruise line, right? So obviously some industries have been hit harder by the pandemic. Cruise lines,
Mhm.
hospitality, space,
Yep.
restaurants. Are those the industries that you're going after?
Yeah, well, I mean, it doesn't have to be. Everyone got hit hard, especially the SMB guys, right?
Yeah.
Especially all the small mom and pops across the country. I mean, you'd be surprised how many companies my size have their own servers and have their own some small little server closet, right? They have to continue to maintain because they might have proprietary information on it, right? I've got a buddy that's he runs like a sales consulting group, and all of his data is stored on his servers on prem, not at AWS or in the cloud somewhere. So he needs help maintaining those things. And there's lots of guys out there. It doesn't matter if you're a restaurant or if you're a school district, right? These guys have on prem that they need support on.
So there's not a particular industry that you've been doing well in. It's kind of across the board then.
It's yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it really is. I mean, healthcare, banking we're doing well with. A lot of the guys that are staying with their on-premises hardware, those are the guys that we're obviously doing the best with. But we also do support some large MSPs that they support small guys. So guys that have their own data center, like a CLEC or like an AWS or an MSP that has their own data centers, and they sell that support. We're supporting those guys as well. And the end user customer, the SMB, is paying them a monthly service to just use their data centers. They don't own any equipment. So we work on the cloud space as well. Yeah, it's across the board. We're starting to build into starting to get in the federal business as well. Federal end users. We work with Boeing and Northrop Grumman today on just maintaining hardware that's end of support, right? It's legacy hardware, they call it. It's on-prem legacy hardware. It's 4 or 5 year old server that's still doing its job. It's not broke, don't fix it. So it really is across the board. There's not one industry can't that doesn't want to save money today.
Right. When do you hit that line of when it no longer needs to be just the maintenance? They need to get that new product. When do you make that call?
It depends. Usually it's around 7 years is when people refresh their hardware, because then,
Mhm.
then you run out of vulnerability support from the manufacturer, the OEM, and software support, right? But again, we've got servers. I've got a Sun server at Disney that's 14 years old. I don't know what it's doing. It's still chugging along. We don't know what it's doing over there.
Right.
And another, I was at a call the other day. We have a Cisco, I think it was a Cisco server, some kind of Cisco hardware, and the uptime on it was 12 years. It had been running for 12 years,
Wow.
still doing its job, right? A lot of times in the data center, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Like you can, the data transformation, it's never smooth. It's never just a crossover. You never just go, okay, these are the setup. Now flip a switch. It's, oh gosh, what did we miss? So the data center guy, especially the older it is, people are like, oh, I don't even know what that thing's running. Don't mess with it. Just
Right.
just let it go. Don't turn it off because I don't know what it's going to. But let's keep it going, I guess.
Yeah, we don't know what it does, but just keep it going just in case.
Yeah, I've heard stories from our engineering team. Literally, so I was like, we had like 90 servers running in this data center in Arizona, and no one, for like a big telecom company, no one knew what they were for. Lights are on, and they're like, well, we're moving the data center, so unplug them and see who calls first and complains. They didn't know what it was going to. It turns out no one did.
Oh, jeez.
So they must have been redundant somewhere. So where it's crazy. You're talking about a lot of equipment, a lot of data, so it's easy to get stuff lost out there. It's funny.
Scott, you mentioned that things are going well right now. Obviously, with the pandemic, people are trying to cut costs. They're not buying new hardware. They're trying to maintain it. What are your plans for, when we get out of this? Do you, what are the plans to generate more revenue this way? Do you think you're going to see some of that decrease? Do you think that this was good in the sense that more people are looking at maintenance and they're going to keep that on over time? What's your outlook?
Yeah, we see it we think it's going to continue to grow. We think 5, 6, 7 years from now, when things start to maybe rebound, right? The problem is when you're a large company or any company, when you're me and you were paying $100 for something and now you're paying $50 for something, it's not very easy to go back to $100. You've now set a trend and you have a budget now based off of $50. And now, great, okay, we're making money again. Now you already know how, one, your network is safe and you're being supported well. Why would you ever go back and pay double? What we're doing is creating a customer base for the future out of necessity. For the end user has to do it because, well, we have to save money. We're not going to buy new equipment. We're not going to buy OEM support. We're going to go with third party. You can't get off of it, right? Your budget's going to be tied to saving money, and obviously the CFO and the CEOs of big companies, or again the small companies, everyone likes to save money. Once you realize it's nothing's going to happen, you're not going to get hurt, and your business isn't going to be affected by using a third party support option, you're stuck on it.
You mentioned before that you're working on some books and you talked about the importance of networking, et cetera. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so the guy that introduced us, Harry Brelsford, I asked him to help me position this new model, right? So third party maintenance is the term that's out there today. I work in the distribution channel, and the term third party kind of has um, a negative feeling, I guess, or sound to it when talking to partners, especially because of third party hardware in the last decade or so. It drew some not so great people, and it kind of drove the name down, right? The name third party. So we also built our model to operate where the reseller consumes it a lot like they buy original Cisco Juniper HP product from distribution. So we call our model, instead of third-party maintenance, I created a whole new model called alternative to OEM maintenance, AOM. And if you notice from all of our names, AltNet, ATS, ATO data, it's all alternative to OEM, right?
Mhm.
Alternative networking, right? So we created a model called alternative to OEM maintenance. And I kind of outlined the book, and Harry helped me with to made it sound like a smart guy, basically. He did the ghostwriting for me, but while writing the book, Harry and I started chatting more, and he's like, "How did you do this on your own with no cash?" I did this with no money out of pocket. I started a business literally with zero cash out of pocket. Had an idea, had the right names, had the right partners, but more importantly, had the right relationships. So out of the AOM book came another idea, and something that I've been saying for years, right? It's not who you know, it's who you bro. And I think it's important now for a couple of things, right? It's not who you know, it's who you bro is going to tell the story about how I built a business out of nothing to $10 million in 2 years, right? And growing very fast because of my relationships, right? So that's the main thing, right? How did I build a story? I'm going to build a kind of a roadmap on it. Talk to this guy first. Talk to this guy first. So if you're in the auto parts business, try to map yours to how I did it in the IT business. If you sell makeup, try to do it to the makeup. It's all do distribution, right? So we'll talk about that too. But more importantly, what I want to do is get back, especially with COVID and everyone's been so separated and not working. Social media and LinkedIn and Facebook, more on LinkedIn for the business side. It's everyone thinks they know everybody now, right? And it doesn't
Right.
work that way. I love it when I
Right.
talk.
We're
to
connected on
somebody.
LinkedIn. We're best friends.
Exactly. I love it when I talk to people, and one of the big names I can throw out there is a guy named Kirk Robinson. He's a big shot over at Ingram Micro. I think he runs the Western Hemisphere basically, right? He's the CEO of the West. So big deal. Luckily, I started back at Ingram Micro back in the day. And look, he and I aren't like save my life and nom friends. Don't get me wrong. But we lived in the same neighborhood. His daughters used to babysit my daughters. So get a bit of a relationship there. But he's a big name, right? So it's funny when I talk to people, I go, oh, you work with Ingram Micro. Oh, yeah, I know Kirk Robinson. Do you? Does he know you? That's the problem. I know him
Right.
too. I'm not going to call him and ask him for a favor, though. I'm not that kind of no.
Right. I had a restaurant. I had a restaurateur tell me once that certain people would call up and say, "No, so I know so and so," but then they wouldn't know who they are. Right. They act
Right.
like they know the owner, but the owner doesn't know who they are, so they must not be that close of friends. Right.
That's what I love saying. Does he know you?
Yeah.
That's the problem. Yeah, I don't know. So again, it's not who you know to you, bro. You've got to have those buddies too. I was on a conversation yesterday, and the guy was saying, "Oh, do you know so and so?" I was like, "No, I know him really well." Like, "Oh yeah, well, how well?" I'm like, "Well enough, like where we could have gone to jail a few times, that kind of well. Like, we're that kind of buddies." He's like, "Okay."
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Close enough.
that's the ultimate, bro. That's the ultimate, right? It's not who you know to you. It's the guys you have some good experiences with that make you so tight.
Yeah, I mean, so you leverage a lot of those relationships, but you were in the industry for a long time. So you had a huge network of people. So if somebody's listening to this podcast and maybe they're starting their business and they really don't have a lot of those relationships to begin with, what do you suggest they do? They go out and join certain organizations or networking groups, or do you have any suggestions?
Yeah, well, that is a good thing about LinkedIn and social media now, right? It's not hard to find somebody. It's not hard to find someone's name,
Mm-hmm.
or get a hold of them these days.
Yeah.
Not hard. Maybe over the phone it's a little bit harder than usual, but it's not that hard. But it's the number one rule in sales. I love asking this, especially the younger guys. I work with some smaller resellers and younger guys, and I always ask. I always say before I start talking about my product, I always go, "Let me ask you, what kind of sales experience do you guys have?" And I'm going to give you some sales training. What's the number one rule in sales?
Mm.
Number one, and everyone throws out these different things and no one really knows it anymore. You have to ask for the sale. You just have to ask. So it doesn't necessarily mean ask for a PO. It means ask for something. And I've never had anyone tell me no when I sincerely ask somebody, "Hey, I'm new in this business. I'm not experienced with what you do. If I could really use some help, do you have any kind of feedback, any kind of notes you can give me to help me kind of get going? I'd really appreciate it. What do you need? Just ask. Just
Mm-hmm.
ask for help. No one's gonna tell you no. I've
Mm-hmm.
never had someone go, no, screw you, pal, and go. It's always, yeah, sure, man. Let me help you out. Here's what I did.
Yeah.
I've never had someone tell me no. It's just that simple. People I think are so I don't know, moved. And maybe, I mean, COVID didn't help, right? With everyone kind of being at home by themselves, but I don't know, people hide behind their phones and hide behind their screens, and they forget that it's not easy to tell someone no when you're talking to them in person, or you know what I mean, or if you're on the phone or even over an email. It's not very easy to. Most people want to help,
Mm-hmm.
so that's my suggestion. Just ask. What are they gonna do? Tell you no? Call the next guy.
Well, people are obviously people are afraid of rejection, right? That's always the biggest concern. And I think, you've probably seen over the years, people are afraid to be wrong about things too. They don't want people to know that they may not know something. And sometimes you need to have that vulnerability when you reach out to people for help. And we all don't know everything, right? So you just got to be okay with not knowing something and asking for help.
Yeah, 100%. I'm sure everyone's learned this lesson, right? If you don't know, just tell me I don't know,
Right.
and you'll find out, right? Don't it's good to show that. I love my favorite thing because I work in the data center, and sometimes things will get, well, not sometimes, oftentimes things will get over my head, and I love telling, when I'm on the phone with a bunch of engineers and they think I'm just a dumb sales guy because they're right. when they so I like to stop and go, you guys lost me 3 acronyms ago. I got to get my engineer. And they all laugh. They all get a joke. They thank you for being honest with us. That's all you got to do is just be honest. Hey, you know what, man? You've lost me, but I do have a guy, right? I'm going to help figure this out. I love the challenge. Let me help you figure this out. Help solve problems for people, and that usually helps open the door. And you got a friend for life and a customer for life.
Scott, when did those books come out, or are they out already?
So AOM just got released. We're going to put it on our website now. That's not really one that we're trying to sell, obviously. It's really for me to announce what AOM is to resellers that are partnered with third-party maintenance providers today, right? These guys, that's who I want to grow up to be. I'm not bad-mouthing the TPM guys. We just have a different model, right? Our model is power through distribution, so we call it channel friendly, right? We cannot sell direct to an end user. I never have, I never will. I use the distribution model, which includes, again, a distributor. So we don't talk to the end users. We never do, right? TPM providers now, most of their business is direct to end users. So I wrote the book and to really introduce AOM and explain the difference between AOM and let them know that we are channel friendly. You have another option. You don't have to go with the big guys that have been out there for a while. You can go with your oldest, most trusted partner. I love telling this to people. Like, I don't care if you are CDW or Tom's Computer Shack. Who's been your oldest, most trusted partner since you've been in business? Who gave you terms? Who picked, packed, and shipped product for you? Who helped you with your website? Who made you look like a giant when you were just a one-man shop? Your distribution partner.
Mm.
And they've never taken your customer direct because it's not their model.
Mm-hmm.
So we want to get that message out there on the AOM book. It's not who you know, it's who you bro. It's quickly turning into a third book, right? And we're going to take that message there, and I'll give you a sneak preview on that. I don't know if you remember the story, Stone Soup, when you were a kid. You ever heard that story?
No, I haven't.
It's basically this guy that goes from town to town. All he has is a pot and a rock, and he's like a vagabond kind of guy. He walks in town to town. It's an old European story, but goes from town to town. He sits down and he gets his pot and puts his rock in it and fills it with water. And someone from the town comes over and goes, "What are you doing?" He's like, "Oh, I'm making soup with a rock." Yeah, and he tastes a little bit. He goes, "I can use some salt. You got any salt? If you give me some salt, I'll share it with you." That's another way I built this business model, right? Is, hey, I don't want overhead. I want to, and you're gonna be doing the work for me. So I'll get you into Ingram Micro. I'll get you into distribution, and you do the back end support for me. So I started with a hardware guy, and then a maintenance guy, and then kind of just started adding ingredients until I built this business with just a big group of small businesses, just a bunch of small guys to go compete with the biggest guys out there. And we're doing it. It's really cool, unique story, but it's not actually, it's not unique. It's not like, you just had to ask.
Right.
No one can, you can't do everything yourself. It's the first thing, and I don't, and I didn't want to do anything myself. I don't want the overhead. So I just brought the right players in. And within, a year or so, I had 8 partners that each do their own thing. One guy does cables, one guy does transceivers, one guy does memory, one guy does server maintenance, storage maintenance, network maintenance, and together we're all a bunch of small guys. Together we're a big guy competing with some really big companies. And the cool thing with our model is we don't have their overhead. So
how do you go about?
Competitive.
I don't mean to interrupt you, but how do you go about evaluating all those partners, right? Because they're all under you, right? So you don't want to damage your brand whatsoever. So you have to go out there and pick the right partners.
For the hardware side, it was easy. I've known the guys for 25 years, right?
Yeah.
For the service side, it was also easy as well. They've been doing it for 25 years and I haven't. Mm-hmm. So, it was vetting them out through friends, and most of them were through relationships, right? Our vice president of service delivery, he's been in the business for so long, he knew which guys to bring in and which guys to stay away from, right? So again, just not who you know, it's who you bro. It really sounds so simple and so like kind of joking, but it's seriously, it really is relationships. I know this guy, can trust this guy. He's a good fella.
Where can people get those books? You mentioned on the website. What's the website so people know?
Yeah, so zpiaom.com, which is, again, Zepol Productions Inc., Alternative OEM Maintenance, so zpiaom.com. And I think it's going to be on Amazon soon. It's going to be, this is the AOM book. The, not who knows, two bros, we're hoping June, July for that. And again, we're going to try to get that on Amazon. And that's something, man, I'm going to pick your brain, TJ, because I'm not a podcast guy. I've kind of just been running businesses here, but I think with guys like you, and we can build a big network to all help each other out, right? You'd be surprised, it's how often someone, asks me, do you know someone that does this, the most random things, the most random thing? I do know someone that does that. I do have a friend that does that. So I want to build this network out. I don't know, something similar to what you're doing, to do some podcasts and just build a big group out for people to start helping each other out.
Yeah, I'd be happy to help. Let me know what I can do. I mean, it's like you said before, it's really the networking. I find myself just putting people together, just, a professional networker. That's how I feel sometimes, right?
Man, I'll tell you what, I had someone call me. It was a while back. There was a show on like Bravo or something, like Patty the Matchmaker or something. He's like, you're like Patty the Matchmaker. It's all you do is matchmake you. How do you know all these people? Like, I'm just old now.
I'm just
been around for a long time. You meet a lot of people, I guess. I don't know. It's I think it's just it. You just go to the right events and be in the right circles and be nice to everybody.
Yeah. And it always comes back to you too, right?
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Right. One thing you got to remember too is don't expect anything out of it. You're doing it to be nice. Yeah. Just don't expect anything out of it and it'll come back.
Scott, thanks for coming on the podcast today. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it.